Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to all of you on the excellent educational platform of Foundation Agri classes. I am your host, and in today's special audio learning session, we are going to deeply explore a very important topic of agriculture in a simple, clear, and highly engaging way so that your concepts become crystal clear and your exam preparation becomes truly strong.
I am genuinely excited for this one. When you look at the syllabus for the big competitive exams, IRS, NET, JRF, ICAR, this topic, wastelands and problem soils, it's always there.
That's a cornerstone topic.
It is, but it can feel like this massive, slightly intimidating block of definitions and chemistry. But I know it's absolutely critical if I want to score well.
Well, it's only intimidating if you try to just memorize it without any context. But you're absolutely right about its importance. This isn't just about passing an exam. It's about understanding the very foundation of Indian agriculture.
The land itself.
Exactly, our primary resource. So our mission, by the end of this deep dive, is to make sure you fully master the definitions, the classifications, the causes, and all the detailed properties of these soils. The goal is that you won't just memorize them, you'll understand the logic behind them, so you won't need to go back and read the text again.
That is exactly what I need. I really want to move from just knowing the terms to, really getting the why and the how. So let's start at ground zero. We hear the term wasteland a lot. In everyday language, it just means empty or useless land. But in agriculture, I'm guessing it has a much more precise meaning.
Oh, absolutely. In agricultural science, we can't afford to be vague. The core concept of a wasteland is that it's degraded land. But we need a metric, a way to measure that degradation.
Right.
The specific characteristic you need to remember is that it's land which is underutilized, unproductive, and here's the key number, it's producing less than 20% of its potential.
Less than 20%. Wow, that's an incredibly low efficiency.
It is. It basically means we are losing over 80% of what that piece of land could be giving us.
That's a massive economic loss when you scale it up.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Think of a factory that's only running at 1/5 of its capacity. That's essentially what a wasteland is in an agricultural sense. Now, for your exams, you also need the official definition, the one used by the NWDB.
The National Wastelands Development Board. Okay, so what's their specific phrasing?
They define it as degraded land which can be brought under vegetative cover with reasonable effort but is presently underutilized.
Reasonable effort. That phrase seems really important.
It is the most important part of that definition. Why do you think that is?
Well, it implies there's hope, right? It's not a lost cause. It suggests it's economically feasible to fix it.
Precisely. It means the land isn't dead. It's just dormant. It's failing right now. But with the right intervention, something reasonable, not miraculous, we can bring it back to productive life.
Okay, so it separates what we could call difficult land from impossible land. But how does land even get into this state? I imagine it's a mix of natural factors and, well, human errors. It's almost always a combination. But human activity is the great accelerator. When we look at the causes of wasteland formation, the list is, well, it's quite damning. The biggest culprit is usually deforestation.
Right, stripping away the tree cover, that seems obvious.
When you remove the trees, you remove the soil's natural armor. It exposes the fragile topsoil to the full force of wind and rain. Then you have overcultivation.
Just farming it too intensely.
Exactly. Pushing the land beyond its carrying capacity, trying to extract too much season after season without properly replenishing the nutrients.
And I imagine overgrazing plays a similar role. I've definitely seen pastures that look like they've been scraped clean by livestock.
A huge role. Overgrazing does two things. It removes the vegetation, and the constant trampling compacts the soil, which makes it harder for water to get in and leads to more runoff and erosion.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then there's improper irrigation. We often think more water is better, but if it's not managed correctly, it leads to waterlogging and salinity, which are two major problems we are going to dissect in detail later on. And of course, you have the more direct industrial factors, things like mining, which just physically destroys the land profile, and the dumping of industrial waste, which chemically pollutes it.
What about shifting cultivation? That's still practiced in some parts of India, isn't it?
Yes, particularly in the Northeast. Shifting cultivation, it's also known as gene cultivation, involves clearing a patch of forest, burning the vegetation to release nutrients, farming it for a few years until the fertility drops.
And then moving on to a new patch.
Exactly. That abandoned land often becomes a wasteland because the natural recovery cycle, the time it needs to regrow, is often cut too short.
It really does sound like a cycle of abuse. We misuse the land, it degrades, and then we label it a wasteland. But are all wastelands the same? I mean, is a deep gully in a ravine treated the same way as, say, a snow-covered mountain peak?
That's a great question, and it brings us right to the classification of wastelands.
Yeah.
We absolutely have to categorize them to even begin to manage them. We divide them into two broad buckets, and it all comes back to that reasonable effort concept we just talked about. First, you have cultivable wastelands, sometimes called culturable. And second, you have uncultivable wastelands.
The names seem pretty intuitive, but let's break them down. So, cultivable wastelands are the ones we can actually fix.
That's it. These are lands that are currently degraded but can be reclaimed for productive use like agriculture or forestry. Think about gullied and ravenous lands like you see in the Chambal region. They look dramatic, but they can be managed.
What else falls into that category?
Waterlogged and marshy lands. Salt-affected lands.
Wait, even salt-affected lands are considered cultivable. They seem so difficult to manage.
They are difficult, but they are reclaimable. With chemical amendments like gypsum or by installing proper drainage systems, they can be brought back into production. That's a reasonable effort.
Okay.
Also in this category are those shifting cultivation areas we mentioned, degraded forests, degraded pastures, and even those narrow strips of land you see along roadsides, railways, and canals, we call those strip lands, they're also considered cultivable wastelands.
Okay, so there's potential there. It's a matter of investment and technology. So what about the uncultivable ones?
These are the lands where nature has pretty much drawn a hard line. Generally speaking, these cannot be reclaimed for agriculture. We're talking about barren, rocky, or stony waste areas.
Right, you can't farm a rock.
Or steep sloping areas, where the grading is so high that soil simply cannot stay put, and as you mentioned earlier, snow-covered lands.
And glaciers, I assume.
Exactly. Land that is permanently covered by snow or glaciers. You can't plant crops on a glacier. So for an exam, this is a key distinction. If you see terms like barren rocky, steep slopes, or glacier, your mind should immediately go to uncultivable.
But if I see waterlogged, saline, or gullied, I should think cultivable.
You've got it. Cultivable means we have a fighting chance. Uncultivable means, for agriculture at least, nature wins.
Okay, so let's narrow our focus to India specifically. What does our wasteland map actually look like? What are the major categories we find here?
In India, the major categories really reflect our incredibly diverse geography. We have significant areas of that gullied and ravenous land, especially in central India. We have vast stretches of land with or without scrub, which is basically degraded forest land.
Okay.
We have the waterlogged and marshy lands, particularly in canal command areas. And then, extremely important for agriculture students, we have the chemical problem categories, saline and alkali soils.
Right, the salt-affected ones.
And of course, we have our unique geographical features like the sandy deserts in the west, coastal sands along our long coastline, wastelands created by mining, and the vast snow-covered areas up in the Himalayas.
It really sounds like we have a bit of everything, but do we have any hard numbers on this? You know, in exams, they love asking for specific data on the extent of these areas.
They certainly do, and these are a few key figures you should commit to memory. Let's look at the big picture. The total geographical area of India is approximately 328 million hectares.
Okay, 328 million hectares, that's our total canvas.
Out of that 328 million, the estimated area of degraded land in total is around 173 million hectares.
Hold on, 173 million. That's more than half of the country's total area. That's a shocking statistic.
It is an alarming number. It includes all land that is suffering from some form of degradation, like soil erosion. Now, if we use the stricter definition of wastelands as a subset of that, they constitute about 14 to 15% of the total geographical area. But that 173 million figure is the one that really highlights the sheer magnitude of the challenge.
It really puts the pressure on. I mean, if half our land is degraded to some extent, we're essentially fighting for food security with one hand tied behind our backs.
That's a very good way to put it.
So geographically, where is the situation the worst? Which states are carrying the biggest burden?
If you visualize a map of India, you can almost predict the hotspots. The states with the highest proportion of wastelands are Rajasthan,
The desert, of course.
Jammu and Kashmir, and Himachal Pradesh.
The mountains and the snow.
Exactly. Then you have Madhya Pradesh, which has those extensive ravines and degraded plateaus, and also Maharashtra and Gujarat, which have a mix of issues, coastal salinity, arid zones, and the rocky terrain of the Deccan Plateau. So the distribution is tied directly to the physical geography of the country.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So we've established what wastelands are, but the title of this session also includes problem soils. Is that just another name for the same thing, or is there a technical difference?
There is a vital technical distinction. Wasteland is really a land use term. It's about productivity. Problem soil, on the other hand, is a soil science term. It's about the inherent properties of the soil itself.
Okay, so how do we define a problem soil then?
A problem soil is a soil that is uneconomical for crop production without reclamation.
I like that definition. It brings it right down to economics. It's not just that the soil is bad, it's that it won't give you a return on your investment unless you fix it first.
Correct. It poses a specific, identifiable constraint to crop productivity. And we classify these problem soils into 3 broad umbrellas, which we're going to spend the rest of our time dissecting.
Okay, what are they?
First, we have physical problem soils. Second, chemical problem soils. And third, biological problem soils.
Physical, chemical, biological, the holy trinity of soil science.
And there's a 4th category, nutritional problem soils. But as we'll see, that's usually a result of one of the first 3.
Before we jump into the deep analysis of those 3 types, I have to ask, why should we care so much? I mean, obviously we want to grow more crops, but are there broader benefits to reclaiming these problem soils?
Oh, it's about so much more than just growing a few more bushels of wheat. There are 6 major benefits to reclamation that you should really understand.
Okay.
1, obviously, it increases the total cultivable land area we have. 2, and this is crucial, reclaiming a patch of bad soil often improves the fertility of the surrounding areas too by preventing runoff and erosion.
Ah, so it has a positive ripple effect.
It does. 3, it generates rural employment. Reclamation is labor-intensive work-building bunds, applying amendments, leveling land. That's jobs.
That's a huge social benefit I hadn't even considered.
4th, it prevents soil erosion. When you fix the soil and establish a vegetative cover, you stop that precious topsoil from washing or blowing away. 5th, it helps maintain ecological balance. And 6th, at the end of the day, it enhances our overall agricultural productivity, which is absolutely essential for our national food security.
So it's an economic, social, and environmental necessity all rolled into one.
Precisely. It's not just an option, it's an imperative. And before we move ahead, here's a quick and important shout out. If you are enjoying this learning session and want more high-quality, concept-based, and exam-oriented agricultural content, make sure to subscribe to Foundation Agri classes. Also, do connect with us on WhatsApp, Instagram, and Telegram, where we regularly share agriculture updates, detailed notes, MCQs, previous year questions, and expert guidance to keep your preparation continuously strong and focused.
Okay, I'm ready to dig in. Let's start with that first umbrella. Physical problem soils. I feel like this is a category that students, including me, often overlook. The chemical problems like salinity get all the attention, but physical problems can be just as devastating for a crop, right?
Absolutely. Think of it this way. If the physical structure of a house is broken, it doesn't matter how nice the furniture is. Physical problem soils are those where the physical condition of the soil itself is what limits plant growth. We have several specific types here.
Let's go through them.
Let's start with A, slow, permeable, or impermeable soils.
Okay, what is actually happening in the soil here? What does that mean?
Imagine a soil that's full of tiny, tiny pores, high capillary porosity, but has very few large pores for drainage. The water enters the soil, but then it gets stuck. It can't drain away.
So it becomes waterlogged.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Leads to poor aeration and waterlogging. And in technical terms, this creates reduced conditions.
Reduced conditions, meaning there's no oxygen available for the plant roots to breathe.
That's it. The roots literally suffocate. Now, on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, we have E, highly permeable sandy soils.
Okay, so these are the other extreme.
Yes, these are common in coastal areas, river deltas, and deserts. Here, the infiltration rate is way too high.
So the water just rushes straight through it like a sieve.
Precisely. The water holding capacity is poor, and so is the nutrient retention. You apply fertilizer, and a good portion of it just washes right past the root zone before the plant can use it. The soil structure is also very weak, so plants can easily lodge or fall over.
So one type of soil drowns the plant, and the other stars and dehydrates it. What else is on the list of physical problems?
Next up is B, soil surface crusting. This is a fascinating and really problematic mechanism. It tends to happen in soils that are rich in iron and aluminium oxides.
How does the crust form?
When a heavy raindrop hits the bare soil, the impact causes the soil particles to disperse, to fly apart. Then as the surface dries, these iron and aluminium oxides act like a kind of natural cement.
Like a glue, binding the particles together.
Yes, effectively turning the top few millimeters of the soil into a hard, impermeable seal or crust. This causes 2 huge problems for a farmer.
Okay.
First, mechanical resistance. A tiny germinating seedling pushes up from below, but it hits this hard roof and it just can't break through. Germination fails.
And the second problem.
Infiltration. The next time it rains, the water hits that hard crust and just runs off the surface instead of soaking into the soil where the crop needs it.
That sounds incredibly frustrating. You can see the rain falling, but it can't get into your soil.
It is. Now, a related problem, but one that happens deeper down, is C, subsoil hardpan. This is very common in the red soils of India.
Okay, a hard pan, so a hard layer.
It's formed by a process called alluviation. Do you remember what that is?
Alluviation is
Fine.
the downward movement and accumulation of materials in a lower soil layer, right?
Spot on. Fine clay particles wash down from the surface layers and accumulate in the subsoil. There, just like with the crust, they get cemented together by iron oxides, aluminium oxides, and sometimes calcium carbonate. This creates a rock-hard layer below the surface.
So it's like a hidden concrete floor under the topsoil.
That is a perfect analogy. The plant roots grow down, they hit this hard pan, and they just stop. Or they grow sideways. They can't penetrate it to access deeper water or nutrients. It severely restricts the effective root zone depth.
And that explains why practices like deep plowing or chiseling are often recommended for these soils to physically break that pan.
You got it. And speaking of depth, that brings us to D, shallow soils. These are simply soils where the parent rock is very close to the surface, maybe only 15 to 20 centimeters down. They just don't have enough volume to hold sufficient water for a crop through a dry spell.
Okay, and what's the last one?
The last one is F, heavy clay soils. These are defined as having more than 40% clay content. They are incredibly difficult to work with. They're hard as a brick when dry, super sticky when wet, and they suffer from very poor drainage, often leading to flooding.
That covers the physical side really well. It's all about structure, texture, permeability, and physical barriers. Okay, now let's move to what you call the heavyweight category, chemical problem soils. This is where and I think a lot of students start to get confused with the definitions.
You are not alone. Chemical problem soils are a favorite area for examiners to set tricky questions. We need to be very precise with our definitions here, especially the numbers. Let's start with the big one, salt-affected soils.
Right, and you mentioned these are primarily found in arid and semi-arid regions. Why there specifically?
It's all about the balance of water. In these dry regions, evaporation from the soil surface is greater than the rainfall coming down. So water from below moves up through the soil profile via capillary action, evaporates into the air, and leaves all its dissolved salts behind in the upper layers.
Over time, they just accumulate.
Exactly. Now, we divide salt-affected soils into 3 distinct types. I want you to pay very close attention to the 3 key parameters. EC, which is electrical conductivity, ESP, which is exchangeable sodium percentage, and pH.
Okay, EC, ESP, and pH. I'm ready. Let's tackle them one by one.
First, we have saline soils. Think of these simply as salty soils. The visual indicator you often see is a white, fluffy crust of salts on the surface. For this reason, we sometimes call them white alkali.
Okay, white crust. And the parameters.
The parameters are EC is greater than 4 dsm. That's decicements per meter. High salt content means the soil solution conducts electricity well. ESP is less than 15. This is key. The problem is general salts, not specifically sodium, and the pH is usually less than 8.5.
Okay, let me repeat that back. Saline is high salt, so EC is greater than 4. Low sodium, so ESP is less than 15. And a relatively neutral-ish pH, less than 8.5.
Precisely. Now, contrast that sharply with the second type, sodic soils, which are also called alkali soils. Here, the problem isn't just generic salt. It is specifically the sodium ion.
Okay, so the parameters will be different.
They flick. For sodic soils, EC is less than 4 dsm. The total salt content is low. But ESP is greater than 15. This is the defining feature high exchangeable sodium. And because of the sodium, the pH is high between 8.5 and 10.
And what does a sodic soil look like in the field? Is it also a white crust?
No, it looks very different. High sodium acts as a dispersing agent. It forces the clay particles apart, destroying the soil structure. The soil becomes gooey and impermeable. This high pH also dissolves some of the soil organic matter, which spreads out and can give the surface a black, oily appearance. That's why these are often called black alkali.
Ah, that's a crucial distinction for identification. Saline is the white crust, sodic is the black dispersed soil, and the EC and ESP parameters are basically opposites.
Correct. And then you have the third type, which is the unluckiest of all, saline sodic soils. As the name suggests, this is a combination of both evils.
So I'm guessing high EC and high ESP.
You've got it. EC is greater than 4, and ESP is greater than 15. The pH is variable. These soils have both a high concentration of soluble salts and a high amount of exchangeable sodium.
That must be a real nightmare to manage. You have to tackle both the salt problem and the sodium problem.
It is the most challenging of the three. Now, moving away from the salts, let's look at the other end of the pH scale, B, acid soils. These are defined by a low pH and low base saturation. While salt-affected soils are common in dry regions, acid soils are common in humid, high rainfall regions.
Why is that?
The heavy rainfall leaches out, or washes away, the basic cations like calcium, magnesium, and potassium from the soil profile, leaving behind the more acidic elements.
And what are the specific dangers for a plant growing in acid soil?
It's a double whammy of toxicity and deficiency. The toxicity comes mainly from aluminium and manganese. In acid soils, aluminium becomes soluble, and it's highly toxic to plant root growth. It stunts the roots.
Okay, so toxicity of some elements.
And deficiency of others. The essential nutrients like calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, boron, and molybdenum become less available.
Phosphorus fixation is a huge issue in acid soils, isn't it? I remember reading about that.
It's a classic problem. The phosphorus gets chemically locked up with iron and aluminium, forming insoluble compounds, so the plant can't absorb it even if it's in the soil. Just for context, acid soils cover about 800 million hectares globally, and a significant area, roughly 100 million hectares, in India.
Wow, that's a huge area. Are there any special types of acid soils we need to know for exams?
Yes, there's one very specific and dangerous type. C, acid sulfate soils. These are very distinct. You find them in coastal areas, in marshes and swamps. They contain high amounts of iron sulfides, specifically a mineral called pyrite.
Okay, pyrite, iron sulfide.
These soils are like a ticking chemical time bomb. As long as they are underwater, submerged, and without oxygen, they are relatively stable. But if you drain them, say to try and use the land for agriculture, the pyrite gets exposed to the air.
Oxidation happens.
Yes. The pyrite oxidizes and forms large quantities of sulfuric acid. The soil pH drops drastically, often falling below 4. It creates an incredibly harsh, corrosive, acidic environment.
A pH below 4 is basically like trying to grow a plant in vinegar. Almost nothing could survive that.
Very, very few crops can tolerate it.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on from acids, we have D, calcareous soils. These are soils that contain free calcium carbonate, or kipawaro.
And is there an easy way to identify them?
There's a very simple field test. You just drop some dilute hydrochloric acid on the soil. If it effervesces, if it fizzes and bubbles, it's calcareous. Their pH is typically alkaline, greater than 8.5.
That's a great practical tip to remember. And finally, I assume the last chemical category is the one we've created ourselves.
Yes. D, man-made polluted soils. These are soils that have been degraded by our own activities, the indiscriminate use of pesticides, contamination from heavy metals for industry, petroleum spills, industrial waste, and chemicals leaching from landfills.
We've covered physical and chemical quite thoroughly now. That just leaves the third umbrella.
Biological problem soils. I feel like this one gets discussed less often than the other two.
It does get less attention in introductory classes, but it is fundamentally the engine room of the soil. Biological problem soils arise when the living component of the soil is damaged or compromised.
That's soil life.
Exactly. And the first and most critical issue here is A, low soil organic carbon, SOC.
Organic carbon is basically the food and fuel for all the soil microbes, right?
That's the perfect way to think of it. If the SOC is low, the microbial population starves and their activity drops. These microbes are the ones responsible for breaking down organic matter and recycling nutrients. If they aren't eating and working, the nutrients stay locked up and unavailable to plants.
So low SOC also hurts soil structure.
Absolutely. The byproducts of microbial activity, the sticky substances they excrete, are what help glue soil particles together into stable aggregates. Without them, the soil loses its structure. It becomes lifeless and prone to compaction and erosion. So the soil literally becomes dead.
We can actually measure this life. One way is by looking at B, low soil respiration. Just like us, the living soil breathes. It takes in oxygen and gives off carbon dioxide. Low respiration is a direct indicator of low biological activity and slow nutrient cycling.
And what else?
We can also look at C, low enzyme activity. The soil is full of enzymes that drive all the key chemical reactions for decomposition and mineralization. If the enzyme activity is low, these essential processes grind to a halt.
This connects perfectly to that final category you mentioned at the start, nutritional problem soils.
Yes, it does. Nutritional problem soils are, as we said, actually a resultant category. These problems almost always happen because of the physical, chemical, or biological constraints we just spent all this time discussing.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. If you have an acid soil, which is a chemical problem, You get phosphorus fixation, which is a nutritional problem. If you have a subsoil hardpan, a physical problem, the roots can't reach the deep nitrogen, leading to a nutritional deficiency.
And if you have low soil organic carbon, a biological problem, you get poor mineralization and a general lack of available nutrients.
You've got it. That really ties it all together. The nutritional problem is the symptom. The physical, chemical, or biological issue is the underlying disease.
And as a student or a professional, you need to be able to diagnose the disease, not just throw fertilizer at the symptom.
That is the perfect analogy.
This has been an incredibly comprehensive session. I feel like we've gone from the 30,000-foot view of wastelands across India all the way down to the microscopic enzyme activity in a problem soil.
It's a big topic, but hopefully breaking it down like this makes it manageable. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive. Let's just do a quick conceptual recap to lock all of this in before we sign off.
Good idea.
We started with the definition of wastelands, and the key takeaway there is that less than 20% potential rule.
Right.
We looked at the causes, things like deforestation, overgrazing, and improper irrigation.
And we classified them into the two big groups: cultivable, the ones we can fix, and uncultivable, the ones we generally can't.
Exactly. We also talked about the massive scale of the problem, that shocking 173 million hectares of degraded land in India. Then we shifted to problem soils.
Where we broke them down into the three main umbrellas.
Right. Physical problems, the structural barriers. Remember the surface crusting acting like a cement roof and the hard pans acting like a hidden floor?
Then chemical problems. We really clarified the big three salt-affected soils: saline, with its white crust and high EC; sodic, with its black dispersion and high ESP; and the distinct acid soils with their aluminium toxicity.
And finally, we touched on biological problems, recognizing the critical importance of soil organic carbon as the fuel for all soil life and how all these three lead to nutritional issues.
And we realized that fixing these isn't just about farming more land. It's about creating jobs, protecting the environment, and securing our food future.
Absolutely. You have mastered the topic today. A solid foundation has been built. If you found today's detailed audio learning session helpful, do not forget to subscribe to Foundation Agri classes, like this episode, and share it with your friends so that more students can benefit from quality agricultural education. Thank you for listening, and keep learning.